Welcome back on Bambalyor. Please subscribe, like, share, and also comment. If you're new here on this channel, you will get to know more about famous people around the world. So this video is about Martin Luther King Jr., who was an American Baptist minister and activist who was one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. A black church leader and the son of early civil rights activist and the minister Martin Luther King Sr., King advanced civil rights for people of color in the United States through nonviolence and civil disobedience. Inspired by his Christian beliefs and the nonviolent activism of Mahatma Gandhi, he led targeted nonviolent resistance against Jim Crow laws and other forms of discrimination in the United States. King came from a comfortable middle-class family steeped in the tradition of the Southern Black ministry. The family lived in Auburn Avenue, otherwise known as Sweet Auburn, the bustling Black Wall Street, home to some of the country's largest and most prosperous black businesses and black churches in the years before the civil rights movement. Young Martin received a solid education and grew up in a loving extended family. This secure upbringing, however, did not prevent King from experiencing the prejudices then common in the South. In 1944, at age 15, King entered Morehouse College in Atlanta under a special wartime program intended to boost enrollment by admitting promising high school students like King. At Morehouse, King favored studies in medicine and law, but these were eclipsed in his senior year by a decision to enter the ministry, as his father had urged. King's mentor at Morehouse was the college president, Benjamin Mays, a social gospel activist whose rich oratory and progressive ideas had left an indelible imprint on King's father. Committing to fighting racial inequality, Mays accused the African American community of complacency in the face of oppression, and he prodded the black church into social action by criticizing its emphasis on hereafter instead of the here and now. It was a call to service that was not lost on the teenage King. He graduated from Morehouse in 1948. King spent the next 3 years at Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania, where he became acquainted with Mohandas Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence as well as with the thought of contemporary Protestant theologians. Earned a Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1951. Renowned for his oratorical skills, King elected president of Crozer's student body, which was composed almost exclusively of white students. From Crozer, King went to Boston University, where in seeking a firm foundation for his own theological and ethical inclinations, he studied man's relationship to God and received a doctorate in 1955 for dissertation titled A Comparison of the Conceptions of God in the Thinking of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Wieman. While in Boston, King met Coretta Scott, a native Alabamian who was studying at the New England Conservatory of Music. They were married in 1953 and had 4 children. King had been pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, slightly more than a year when the city's small group of civil rights advocates decided to contest racial segregation on the city's public bus system following the incident on December 1, 1955, in which Rosa Parks, an African-American woman, had refused to surrender her bus seat to a white passenger and as a consequence was arrested for violating the city's segregation law. Improvement Association to boycott the transit system and choose King as their leader. He had the advantage of being a young, well-trained man who was too new in town to have made enemies. He was generally respected, and it was thought that his family connections and professional standing would enable him to find another pastorate should the boycott fail. In his first speech to the group as its president, King declared, "We have no alternative but to protest. For many years we have shown an amazing patience. We have sometimes given our white brothers the feeling that we liked the way we were being treated. But we came here tonight to be saved from the patience that makes us patient with anything less than freedom and justice." These words introduced to the country a fresh voice, a skillful rhetoric, an inspiring personality, and in time, a dynamic new doctrine of civil struggle. Although King's home was dynamited and his family's safety threatened, he continued to lead the boycott until 1 year and a few weeks later. The city's buses were desegregated. Recognizing the need for a mass movement to capitalize on the successful Montgomery action, King set about organizing the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which gave him a base of operation throughout the South, as well as a national platform from which to speak. King lectured in all parts of the country and discussed race-related issues with religious and civil rights leaders at home and abroad. In February 1959, he and his party were warmly received by India's Prime Minister Nehru and others as the result of a brief discussion with followers of Gandhi about the Gandhian concept of peaceful non-compliance. King became increasingly convinced that non-violent resistance was the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. King also looked to Africa for inspiration. In 1960, King and his family moved to his native city of Atlanta, where he became a co-pastor with his father of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. At this post, he devoted most of his time to the SCLC and the civil rights movement, declaring that the psychological movement has come when a concentrated drive against injustice can bring great, tangible gains. His thesis was soon tested as he agreed to support the sit-in demonstrations undertaken by local black college students. In late October, he was arrested with 33 young people protesting segregation at the lunch counter in Atlanta department store. Charges were dropped, but King was sentenced to Reddsville State Prison Farm on the pretext that he had violated his probation in a minor traffic offense committed several months earlier. In the years from 1960 to 1965, King's influence reached its zenith. Handsome, eloquent, and doggedly determined, King quickly caught the attention of the news media, particularly of the producers of that budding medium of social change, television. He understood the power of television to nationalize and internationalize the struggle of civil rights, and his well-publicized tactics of active nonviolence aroused and devoted allegiance of many African Americans and liberal whites in all parts of the country. In Birmingham, Alabama, in the spring of 1963, King's campaign to end segregation at lunch counters and in hiring practices drew nationwide attention when police turned dogs and fire hoses on the demonstrators. King was jailed along with large numbers of supporters, including hundreds of school children. Near the end of the Birmingham campaign, in an effort to draw together the multiple forces for peaceful change and to dramatize the country and to the world the importance of solving the U.S. racial problem, King joined other civil rights leaders in organization to historic March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, an interracial assembly of more than 200,000 gathered peaceably in the shadow of Lincoln Memorial to demand equal justice for all citizens under the law. Here the crowds were uplifted by the emotional strength of prophetic quality of King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech, in which he emphasized his faith that all men someday would be brothers. The rising tide of civil rights agitation produced, as King had hoped, a strong effect on national opinion and resulted in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, authorizing the federal government to enforce desegregation of public accommodations and outlawing discrimination in publicly owned facilities as well as in employment. The eventful year was climaxed by the award to King of the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo in December. The first signs of opposition to King's tactics from within the civil rights movement surfaced during the March 1965 demonstrations in Selma, Alabama, which were aimed at dramatizing the need for a federal voting rights law that would provide legal support for the enfranchisement of African Americans in the South. King organized an initial march from Selma to the state capitol building in Montgomery, but did not lead it himself. The marchers were turned back by state troopers with nightsticks and tear gas. He was determined to lead a second march, despite an injunction by a federal court and efforts from Washington persuade him to cancel it. Heading a procession of 1,500 marchers, black and white, he set out across Pettus Bridge outside Selma until the group came to a barricade of state troopers, but instead of going on and forcing a confrontation, he led his followers to kneel in a prayer and then unexpectedly turned back. This decision cost King the support of many young radicals who were already faulting him for being too cautious. The suspicion of all arrangement with federal and local authorities, vigorously but not entirely convincingly denied, clung to the Selma affair. The country was nevertheless aroused, resulting in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. King's plans for a Poor People's March to Washington were interrupted in the spring of 1968 by a trip to Memphis in support of a strike by the city's sanitation workers. In the opinion of many his followers and biographers, King seemed to sense his end was near. The next day, while standing on the second-story balcony of the Lorraine Motel where he and his associates were staying, King was killed by a sniper bullet. On March 10, 1969, the accused assassin, a white man, James Ray, pleaded guilty to the murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. Ray later resented his confession, claiming lawyers had coerced him into confession and that he was the victim of a conspiracy. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share and comment your opinion on the video to tell us who you would like in the next video.